Hi everyone, I'd just like to talk a little bit today about the P7 exam tips for the December 2015 sitting. Now I'm just going to run through each of the sections of the exam. I'm going to go through some core areas, some areas I think you should be focusing on. I mean, at the time of recording this video we are exactly a week away from the exam, so I think we really need to be refining some parts of our studies, making sure we've got these core areas nailed down, we know what's going to come, we're ready, we've got our structure of our answers, and we can get into the exam with a little bit of confidence. Now, the exam itself, split into two sections. We've got section A, which we've got 2 compulsory questions, and then section B, where you've got the choice 2 out of 3 questions. Now, let's just start with question 1. Question 1 is a 35-mark question, split into subsections. Included in this question 1, you're going to have your professional marks rolled up in there. If the exam follows the traditional format of P7, it's going to focus on the planning phase of the audit. You're going to be the audit manager. You're going to receive an email from the partner, and the partner's going to ask you to do a number of things within this question. The idea then is you're going to respond in a professional manner, be it an email or briefing notes for the audit team, which is where these 4 marks are going to come from with the professional issues. In terms of the actual question, if we're focusing on planning, my tip I would say for this sitting would be groups. Groups is a favourite of the examiner. You're going to get groups somewhere in the exam. Hasn't been tested for a couple of sittings now. It can get quite complicated in there. So I would be aware of the implications of groups. I'd be aware of the implications of component auditors within the groups. I'd be aware of how subsidiaries can impact that. Think back to your P2 days about these intercompany transactions, your PERP adjustments, mid-year acquisitions, those working to adjustments of your fair value assets. All of these areas are potential risks for the auditor. I'd also be aware of how to account for an associate, or maybe the examiner could pull in something that's I don't think has been tested in terms of maybe a joint venture. Associates and joint ventures are similar in their accounting treatment in that we equity account for them. So we need that one line in the P&L, one line in the SOFP. On top of the group issues, you're also going to have some standard accounting issues within there. Everyone who's studying for P7, we all should be aware of the importance of these accounting standards. You need to have that good depth of knowledge. And having read the examiner's comments, I was reading this morning before doing this video. One thing the examiner keeps repeating, particularly in the last sitting, the September sitting, where there was a lot of research students, the examiner's comments were students are just identifying points. We're identifying the points and we're not expanding on them. Now I think from a tutor point of view and a marker point of view, that would be frustrating, because for me, if you can identify a point, which is probably the harder thing, you can then expand on it. What I'm trying to say is if you then identify, all we just need to see is 2 or 3 more lines, just explaining from the scenario why this is an audit risk. How is it an audit risk? What's potentially overstated or understated? That will ensure that you get the full maximum amount of marks. Other typical areas that appear in question 1, we ask for risk in part A. They normally then roll risk into a part B where they ask for audit procedures. So they pick up on one of the risks. So it could be maybe one of the risks in part A could be a financial instrument. It could be share-based payments. It could be some sort of defined benefit scheme. So they could ask 4 to 6 marks. Tell me what audit procedures you would complete if you wanted to mitigate this risk down. Then if we go along on a traditional level of P7, Part C then could ask for the ethical and professional issues raised. They could give you like a little paragraph at the end and they give you additional information. Maybe we're providing the non-audit service. It could be that maybe one of our audit members or managers are leaving to join the client and they ask you what are the ethical and professional implications. Moving on to question 2. Question 2 is always a little bit more difficult to predict. The examiner's been mixing this up a little bit in the past few sittings, so it's quite hard to predict exactly what could come in question 2. If we take away the last couple of sittings, a common theme that's happened in question 2 has been this other assurance services. So I'm talking things like due diligence, prospective financial information, performance information in the public sector, social environmental data. Now, if we were going to go down that route, which is probably, if you go back across all the exams, has been the most commonly asked question in question 2. My prediction on one of these non-assurance services would be either prospective financial information, it's not been tested for 12 to 18 months, or probably a bigger tip would be the recent article that's been published on the P7 website, which is focusing on performance information in the public sector, or performance information on companies which are essentially not run for profit. We are run for performance targets. So think about your economy, your efficiency, your effectiveness. Now, with these types of companies, it's a slightly different mindset. We've got to think around the figures. It's quite hard to prepare for this, but you've got to be ready to put yourselves under pressure. You've got to be ready to break down these figures that they give you, and how am I going to test these figures to some sort of source data? Can I discuss it with management in some form or another? Moving on to section B, we've got a choice. There's 2 out of 3 questions. And again, I'll just go back to what I said in question 2. If you haven't had in question 2 a non-assurance service, I would say you're almost going to be guaranteed to get a question in one of these options questions. So the 2 tips I just gave for question 2, if I'm wrong and they're not in question 2, before you shout at me, let's just go to section B, and it could be one of those 3 questions. Other typical areas that come in section B is, again, going back to what I said in section A, your ethical and professional issues. If you're not going to get that in section A, I'd almost be 100% sure it's going to make an appearance somewhere in section B. 2 other typical areas that the examiner tends to ask in almost every exam is this phrase, comment on the matters to be considered and explain the audit evidence you would expect to find. That again, that type of question, I have seen it pop up in question 2. If it's not going to be there in question 2, I'd expect it somewhere again in section B. It's the same idea of that skill set that you've picked up from section A, good depth of knowledge around your accounting standards, taking those accounting standards, and I'm now reviewing the audit senior's file. Evidence you would expect to find on the audit file. What would you expect to find when you open it up? The last question in the exam, question 5, traditionally this focuses on audit reports. I think you've got to toss up here between 2 areas that could potentially be tested. Potentially they will give you an audit report and you would have to appraise that audit report. So there's some good questions in the exam kit where they give you an audit report and you go through and criticise, essentially. You say what could be going wrong. Often the audit opinion is wrong and there's a bit of unprofessional language in there. Headings may be mixed up. If that doesn't come up, I'd expect a single company, they give you some information and the question would state something along the lines of, discuss the implications on the audit report. Again, this goes back to a skill that you would have practiced in audit planning and reviewing, in the sense that you need to know your standards. You need to state how that could affect the financial statements, and then finally roll that into the audit report. What could the potential implications be on that audit report? For everyone who's sitting the exam this sitting, I wish you all the very best of luck. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.